begins now. Here's Vegas Vic.
Hello and welcome to our show. In this program, we are going to concentrate on pot limit and no limit Texas Hold'em. Although both are Texas Hold'em games, the fact that one is a pot limit and the other a no limit game makes them significantly different from the perspective of strategies. Each requires slightly different playing skills, particularly to betting and pot manipulation. And now, let's go to the table. In pot limit Texas Hold'em, you can bet up to the amount of the pot at any time whenever it is your turn to act. You can also raise by the amount of the pot. Of course, you can also bet or raise less than the amount of the pot. For example, often it is to your advantage to bet half the pot or even less. All of these decisions depend on the circumstances in that particular moment and in that particular game. As a general strategy, it is to your advantage to either bet or raise by the size of the pot if you are in late positions with hands such as ace-king or a medium pair. In such circumstances, you are doing this primarily for two reasons. One, to isolate further play against preferably one player, or two, to win the pot uncontested right then and there. Either strategy works very well in these situations. Similar such plays can also be used in no-limit Texas Hold'em, where you can often make pot-sized bets either as continuation plays if you were the initial raiser, or you can make such pot-sized bets for identical reasons as those in pot limit under similar circumstances. Our game is 10-20 pot limit Texas Hold'em, which means that the small blind is $10 and the big blind is $20, and therefore there is $30 in each pot even before any cards are dealt. After each player receives their down cards, the action begins with our under-the-gun player, JR. He now has to decide whether or not to continue with the hand, and since he has pocket jacks, he decides to bet the pot. Strategically, he does that not only to increase the value of the pot for himself, but primarily because a hand such as his, in his position, can quickly become vulnerable to overcards as well as draws. Therefore, JR wants to bet as much as he can in order to hopefully isolate only one other player and thus give himself the best chance to win in case this hand continues to the flop. It is now Pam's turn to act, and she looks at her cards and discovers that she has pocket kings. Because she knows that JR has made a strong bet from under the gun, she suspects that he must have a fairly good hand, probably one of the bigger pocket pairs. Since she has pocket kings, she has to consider whether or not JR has aces. Pam is now in a situation that demands she defines the value of her hand. In our situation, Pam considers the circumstances and decides that although pocket aces are possible, the odds are sufficiently unlikely that her pocket kings are probably the best hand. Therefore, she decides to re-raise the pot. This, of course, now makes it very expensive for our other two players to continue with their hands. And this is precisely the value in the strategic play performed by both JR and Pam. It is exactly this that so substantially differentiates pot limit and no limit Texas Hold'em from limit Texas Hold'em. As a result of Pam's re-raise, JR now has to re-examine the value of his hand. In our example, JR does not believe that Pam has what she is representing and therefore decides to call the extra $80. Therefore, we are now going to the flop. In our example, the flop came with unsuited rags, meaning that the texture of this flop is unlikely to have helped either of our players. Again, the value of the opening raise by JR and the subsequent re-raise by Pam are clearly evident. Had they not done so, a flop of this kind could have easily hit one of the two blinds, which potentially could spell disaster for both players and their big pocket pairs. Therefore, in addition to the isolation play, making a pot-sized bet in pot limit and no limit Hold'em games is also strategically designed to force lesser hands as well as drawing hands to fold prior to the flop and thereby preserve and protect the value of your hand, and in particular hands such as these which contain big pocket pairs. JR now makes a continuation bet of about half the size of the pot, and he bets $100. Although it is generally dangerous to bet into a re-raiser, it is important to remember that in our example, JR does not believe that Pam has the goods and therefore thinks that he can now find out by making a fairly strong bet on the flop. Once again, these situations are applicable to both pot limit and no limit hold'em games, where you can often use these strategic plays to win pots on the flop whenever the flop comes down with uncoordinated rags, such as in our example. Unfortunately for JR, in this case, Pam really does have the goods. She now has two choices. First, she can simply call and hope that she can trap JR for another bet on the turn, or second, she can try to win the pot right here and now and thus not give JR an opportunity to get lucky on the turn or the river. In our example, Pam recognizes the danger, and since there is now $310 in the pot, she decides to try to win the pot right then and there, and therefore makes a pot-sized raise, making it $410 to go. JR now has to decide whether his pocket jacks are worth the extra $310. He now has to call to see the turn card. He also has to consider the fact that Pam is unlikely to slow down, and therefore chances are fairly good that she will make another large bet on the turn. Consequently, JR now realizes that his pot odds and implied pot odds relative to his number of outs are not there, and therefore wisely decides to fold. The dealer now awards the pot to Pam and goes on with the game. In the example we have just shown, it was clear that JR only had two outs, the remaining two jacks, with which he could have possibly improved the value of his hand. Since he had no opportunity to improve to anything else, Pam's strong action made his decision to finally fold the correct one. For both pot limit and no limit hold'em games, the most important strategic advice to remember is that there is no shame in folding. Many players simply hate the prospect of potentially throwing away the winning hand, or a hand that would eventually become the winner. This fear of being bluffed, as well as the uncertainty of what poker players often call the what could have been regrets, are both what costs pot limit and no limit hold'em players the most money. In addition to discipline, good hand selection skills, patience, variety in betting and positional plays, being able to save money by not making reckless calls is equally as important as winning it. Strategically, learning to make folds such as those in our example is the most important lesson that you can ever learn for pot limit and no limit hold'em games. In pot limit hold'em, there is more strategizing, and the mathematics of pot odds, implied pot odds, and the potential for manipulating your opponents in the size of their bets, as well as the size of the pot, are very important. On the other hand, in the no-limit Texas Hold'em game, you can quite often use the power of the all-in move to either completely eliminate a positional disadvantage or to put your opponents off their hand, thereby causing them to throw away what very often would have been the winning hand, and therefore making you the winner. Along with always remembering the importance of position, all of these are critical skills in taking your game to the next level of expertise. For now, and until next time, remember to play smart and play to win. I'm Victor H. Royer, and this has been a presentation of PartyPoker.com. Bye.
This has been a presentation of MRM Entertainment, Inc. in association with Nevada Production Studios and PartyPoker.com.